were scheduled to be here. However, Jane Duker, the only one who has fulfilled her commitment.
The best one.
Jane Duker, former chief of staff to Governor Holder, local attorney, and Sharknado 2 fan.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't tell me the ending. I don't want you to ruin it for me.
Really?
I think they saved the world, though.
Well, always.
Okay, who was your favorite cameo?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I can't even choose. I mean, Judd Hirsch, there were so many homages. I mean, we had Taxi, we had Jaws, there were so many homages to Airplane. Oh, my God, it was great.
Awesome.
I mean, did you ever think that, like, sharks could be on the plane? No, you didn't. See, that's what made it beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, also joining us is attorney, former politician, reform politician, now a filmmaker, and let me just say, probably the best director I've ever worked with, ladies and gentlemen, Jay Kanzler.
Good morning, and McGraw, you were fabulous in Marshall the Miracle Dog.
Yes, it was the direction.
Wow.
I was an acting
Oscar.
I was an acting politician because I was the mayor.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, they actually gave you a role.
Yeah.
With authority.
Also acting politician with us is Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, good morning this morning.
Good to see you. My kids love Marshall the Miracle Dog.
How could you not?
And also Sharknado 2, I'm claiming, has now jumped the shark. So
that's so bad.
I'm just
like
saying.
That's
pathetic.
really good.
You gave me 30
for somebody
seconds.
who didn't watch.
You gave me 30 seconds to prepare. I could do that.
Wow, if you didn't watch, that was funny. Okay.
That is really good. Currently, you are a state senator, and you want to become our next treasurer.
That's right. In 2016, I've announced I'm running for state treasurer.
Okay, good. All right, let's get to it. First of all, Amendment 1 we are voting on Tuesday, and that is the right to farm bill. And quite frankly, I am totally and completely ignorant on all of this. Somebody who is watching this, it sounds like the two sides aren't even reading the same bill. So we'll start with you, Eric Schmidt. What is going on? What does it really say, and what is it trying to do?
Well, I support Amendment 1. I think what's important to know is that you've got over 300,000 people that are employed by family farms. 97% of all the farming in the state is done by family farms. And there has been a real attempt nationally by national groups, the Humane Society of the United States, with a stated objective of ending animal agriculture and hunting. And so this is really a preemptive measure to make sure those practices are protected. So that extends to the organic farmer, just like the conventional farmer, somebody that has grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef. I think this is just a smart way for Missouri to kind of protect itself from these outside interests.
Don't we already have a right to do this?
Yes.
Well, clearly you can farm, but the issue is what kind of regulations, what kind of burdens would come down the pike. I mean, just a couple years ago, the president had proposed a rule, they pulled it back, that kids who were in farming families couldn't work on the farm.
Right.
They pulled that back. It's that kind of stuff I think we're trying to protect Missourians from.
I want to get to this in a second, but I was talking to Farmer Dave yesterday, and Farmer Dave was telling us that there's this California law that says they can't buy eggs from Missouri, right?
Correct.
Now, people look at that as the reason why we need to vote for this bill. Doesn't California have a right to pass a law to say we don't want eggs from Missouri? And how does our law stop California or other states from saying they don't want to buy stuff from Missouri?
Well, I think we're all three lawyers here. I think that issue, and some attorneys general have jumped in to say that might violate the dormant commerce clause to protect, because we're not supposed to.
Commerce.
Exactly, that's an interstate commerce issue. But I think the real issue, the most threatening issue, is that there are PETA and some groups like that really don't believe we should be able to eat beef or chicken. And then as you slowly start to go down the road of a regulatory framework that makes that harder and harder, this constitutional amendment is meant to protect that. It's pretty simple. It's pretty clear. And again, I think it's a hedge against a lot of these regs that are going in other places.
Jane Duker.
Well, first of all, our constitutional amendments aren't going to protect us from federal law. We already know that, so that's nonsense. And the other issue I have is I understand if there might be regulations that would jeopardize our food supply, and I get that both sides are very passionate about what they think or what they're afraid of might happen. But if we're worried about the level of regulation on agriculture or farming, why can't we debate those in the context of, when the legislature is in session and somebody proposes something and they think it's a good idea, bad idea, debate it. But the idea that we're going to pass sort of this right to farm and then we're going to spend 20 years litigating what that means is it's just not good policy. And it's not that it has nothing to do with the substance. It has to do with the idea that we're going to change the Constitution and say right to farm. We're going to battle out in the courts as to what that means, and every single environmental regulation and every single any kind of regulation on agriculture or farming, we're going to litigate as to whether this constitutional amendment prevents that. And I just don't think from a good public policy standpoint that we argue about policies that way. We should take them each one on their merits and say, should we allow, the state to regulate certain agricultural practices or not? Those are legitimate dates.
Hog farms that are on the hill.
CAFO or whatever. Everybody seems to have a lot of different interests, think that this is about them. And, so you're hearing a lot of different things about what this actually covers and doesn't cover, and that's the problem, is we don't really know. And so I think you take regulation on its own merit, each piece. This is a Republican-dominated legislature. Do you really think that, any of these kind of regulations that they're afraid of are going to get through this legislature?
Well, clearly to amend the Constitution, it needs to go through, this process, which is why it's before the voters. But I do think one thing that is important, this doesn't preempt local ordinances in any county in the state to do what they currently do. This is just to sort of, like I said, from out-of-state interests that are going to spend money to do the more onerous things, like make it much more difficult for people to raise cattle. I just think these are fundamental things that have been going on in the state for a couple hundred years, and now we're at a place where you look across the country and there seems to be more of a national effort. And by the way, we've been litigating provisions of our federal Constitution for over 200 years, so It's not an unusual
But we don't
thing.
amend the Constitution federally like we play around with it here.
Jay Kanzler.
Here's my problem with this. Farming is great. Using the amendment process to the Constitution to cover any potential policy issues in the future is a terrible idea. The language shall not be infringed. Way too broad. And what it does is it says, okay, every time somebody says you can't do something, we'll fall back on a constitutional argument that the Constitution says shall not be infringed.
Yeah.
The issues about PETA and the Humane Society, there are arguments on both sides for all of those, and those will be worked out. We've been farming for 200 years, 300 years,
and didn't need
and we've
this.
been arguing about farming for 200 and 300 years, and we'll be doing it for the next 200 or 300 years. Amending the Constitution so broadly that it cannot be defined, shall not be infringed, is way too broad. That means everything, including hog farms sending sewage down your road. There's an argument saying, you know what? If I don't send my sewage down the hill, I can't farm. And by restricting where my sewage goes, my hog stuff, that's infringing on my right to ranch. You know what? That's what it says. And so I don't think we need it. We need to address these issues on a specific individual basis.
A lot of people are turning this a conversation as to liberal versus conservative. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch editorial page is against it, but also the Kansas City Star editorial page came out against this. And the Kansas City Star isn't known as some liberal rag. I thought that was interesting that the Kansas City Star, their editorial page, came out against
Yeah,
this
I don't know
Amendment
that
1.
this one doesn't feel as sort of Democrat Republican. I don't know.
Only if you put faces on the opposite. It's only if it's farming versus PETA. If you narrow it down to those issues, then you maybe get into the liberal conservative issue. But if you step back and say, what is this really about? What does this language say? It's not conservative or liberal. It's about doing things to our Constitution that just don't make sense in the long run.
Well, and the other thing is, too, and I understand, and there's been some legitimate debate about, and I know you talked about out-of-state interest, and everybody has issues with that where they come in and they pay millions of dollars and they get something on the ballot. And I understand that there's been a lot of tension on that, and that's bipartisan. There's been conservative abuse of initiative. There's been, liberal abuse of initiative. And frankly, I'd like to see our efforts go toward that so that, and I understand that there are businesses who feel like, every day I don't know what I'm going to get hit with on an initiative petition. And I know everybody sort of feels like that. So my belief would be, why would we not sort of tighten that process up? And there's a lot of things we could do to reform initiative petitions, not to squelch the people from putting them forth, but to make them a little bit more reasonable so that, it isn't this out-of-state buying our laws.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I do think, though, that this amendment really is about having that certainty, having that regulatory certainty. And to Jay's point, DNR still has control over wastewater issues. None of that stuff goes away. There's
But
still,
how do we know?
How do we know that, Eric?
No, because there's a
the
current
Constitution.
No, but what I'm saying is there's a current regulatory framework that exists in Missouri law that doesn't get changed by this. What we're saying is that the farming practices that farmers have utilized for a couple hundred years in our state, they're not going to be infringed by an out-of-state group that wants to ban beef. I mean, really, that's what this debate is about. So that's why I think Amendment 1 is a very reasonable way of providing that protection to those family farmers.
If that's what it's about, then the people that are trying to ban beef lose automatically. Let's address that one. And
Right.
say the right
I'll
to
take
eat,
'em on.
the
But they're
right
not
to
going to
eat
say, I
meat.
want to ban beef.
The right to eat meat shall not be infringed. I'm okay with that.
But that won't happen. They'll make it so difficult to do that that you won't be able to do
Who
it.
are these people that are overriding the hugely?
HSUS, this is,
What have they gotten done? Other
They've
than
d- they've
puppy
done it in
mills,
other
what have they
states.
gotten done? And they actually got puppy mills done, and then it got amended. So what have these horrible, anti-animal people actually accomplished in our state? I
it's a
understand that it's
stated, I'm just saying
frustrating.
it's a stated objective by these groups.
That's Eric Schmidt. That's Jane Duker. That's John
Kanzler.
Jay Kanzler. Thank you very much. I have it right here in my notes. That's the board meeting. Back in a moment. Big 550.